My name is Jessica Armstrong and I am 32 years old. I built a $45 million business from scratch, paid off my parents' mortgage, and supported my brother through medical school. Last week, my father looked me in the eyes and called me an uneducated lowlife. I said nothing. I simply walked away with my dignity intact. The next day, I moved to my Florida beach house. If you have ever been underestimated by the people who should believe in you most, drop a comment below and let me know where you are watching from. Please like and subscribe to join me on this journey of standing up for yourself. I grew up in a middle-class suburban neighborhood in Michigan, where the houses all looked similar and everyone knew each other. My father, Walter, was a tenured professor of economics at the local university. He had 3 PhDs hanging in his office and made sure every visitor noticed them. My mother, Martha, worked as a high school principal known for her strict discipline and unwavering standards. Together they created a household where academic achievement wasn't just encouraged, it was expected. From as early as I can remember, our dinner conversations revolved around scholarly pursuits. Dad would discuss his latest research paper, Mom would talk about college preparation programs for her students, and my younger brother Michael would share his perfect test scores. When my turn came, I would hesitantly mention my latest business idea, only to watch my parents exchange that look that said, "This again." You see, I was always drawn to business and entrepreneurship. At 12, I started making handcrafted jewelry and selling it to neighbors. By 14, I had set up my first online store, shipping my creations across 3 states. At 16, I developed a small service connecting elderly neighbors with teen helpers for yard work and errands. "These are nice hobbies, Jessica," my father would say, emphasizing the word hobbies like it was something distasteful, "but they won't get you into an Ivy League school." My mother was more direct. "You need to focus on your AP classes if you want to succeed in life. This business nonsense is distracting you from what really matters." I wasn't a bad student. I maintained a solid B average, but I simply didn't love academic work the way my parents and brother did. My mind worked differently. I could spot market opportunities and develop solutions that people would pay for. I understood value creation in ways that seemed to elude my academically brilliant family. When college application season arrived, I applied to the schools my parents selected, including my father's university, where I would receive free tuition. I was accepted and began studying business administration, hoping this compromise would satisfy everyone. For 2 years, I sat through lectures that felt painfully theoretical, while my real business education happened after hours, as I continued growing my online ventures. By the end of my sophomore year, I had built an e-commerce platform that was generating enough revenue to cover my living expenses. I was spending more time on business calls than on homework, and my grades were slipping. One day, after a particularly inspiring meeting with a potential investor, I made the decision that would change everything. I decided to drop out and pursue my business full-time. The evening I told my parents remains seared in my memory. We were sitting in their formal dining room, the one reserved for special announcements and holidays. "I've decided to leave school," I said, trying to sound confident. "My business is taking off and I need to focus on it completely." The silence that followed felt eternal. Then my father's face turned a shade of red I had never seen before. "Absolutely not," he said, his voice dangerously quiet. "No daughter of mine is going to be a college dropout. That is simply unacceptable." My mother's disappointment was somehow worse than my father's anger. "We've given you every advantage, Jessica. How could you throw it all away? What will people think?" "I'm not throwing anything away," I tried to explain. "I'm pursuing an opportunity. My platform has real potential." "Potential," my father scoffed. "What you call potential, I call delusion. Without a degree, you'll be flipping burgers within a year." The argument escalated until my father finally delivered his ultimatum. "If you leave school, you're on your own. We won't support this foolishness." I looked at both of them, these people who had raised me but had never really seen me. "I understand," I said quietly. The next day I withdrew from the university and used my business savings to rent a tiny studio apartment across town. It had a kitchenette barely large enough for a mini fridge and a hot plate. The bathroom doubled as a laundry room with a stacked washer-dryer that rattled alarmingly during spin cycles. But it was mine, and more importantly, it was the headquarters of what would become Armstrong Solutions. The first 6 months on my own were brutally difficult. I lived on ramen noodles and coffee, working 18-hour days developing my software that helped small businesses manage their inventory and customer relationships more efficiently. My tiny apartment became both living space and office, with my bed doubling as a conference table during client calls. I showered quickly and dressed professionally from the waist up for video meetings, hoping no one would notice the pajama pants below. What my software did wasn't revolutionary by Silicon Valley standards, but it addressed a specific need for businesses too small to afford enterprise solutions, yet too complex for basic spreadsheets. I had noticed this gap while helping local shop owners with their websites during college. They all struggled with the same problems, and existing solutions were either too expensive or too complicated. Just when my savings were nearly depleted, and I was considering part-time waitressing to make ends meet, I met Sandra Williams at a local business networking event I had scraped together enough money to attend. Sandra had recently sold her tech company and was looking for promising startups to mentor. Something about my pitch caught her attention. "Your solution is elegant," she said after I demonstrated my software on my battered laptop. "But more importantly, you understand your customers in a way most tech founders don't." Sandra became not just a mentor but an angel investor, providing enough funding to hire my first 2 employees, a developer named Justin, who could improve the code faster than I could alone, and a sales specialist named Rebecca, who had guaranteed connections with small business associations across the Midwest. With this tiny team working from a slightly larger rented office space, Armstrong Solutions began to grow. Our first major client was a chain of 20 family-owned hardware stores struggling to compete with big-box retailers. When our software helped them increase sales by 15% in the first quarter, word spread quickly throughout their industry. Within 2 years, we had 30 employees and had moved to a real office in a downtown building. Our flagship product, Retail Bridge, became known for its intuitive interface and specialized features designed specifically for independent retailers. While the giant tech companies ignored this market segment as too small or troublesome, we embraced it, building personal relationships with thousands of small business owners. I reinvested almost every dollar of profit back into the company, expanding our product line to include specialized solutions for restaurants, boutiques, and service providers. We developed integrations with payment processors and e-commerce platforms that made our clients' businesses run more smoothly. Each improvement came directly from customer feedback, often gathered during my personal visits to their shops. By year 3, we had expanded internationally with clients in Canada, the UK, and Australia. The company was valued at $10 million after a round of Series A funding. By year 5, that valuation had jumped to $25 million as we continued to capture market share and expand our product offerings. Throughout this growth, I maintained a clear philosophy: we would build technology that served people, not the other way around. Our company culture reflected this, with generous benefits, flexible working arrangements, and a strong emphasis on work-life balance, even as I myself worked constantly to grow the business. When our valuation hit $45 million in year 7, I finally allowed myself a significant personal indulgence: a modest 3-bedroom home in a nice neighborhood. Nothing flashy, but it had a small yard where I could plant a garden and a spare room I could use as a home office on the weekends. The day I got the keys, I stood alone in the empty living room and cried, overwhelmed by how far I had come from that tiny studio apartment. What made Armstrong Solutions different was our dedication to creating true partnerships with our clients. We weren't just selling software, we were helping small business owners protect their dreams and legacies. I understood their struggles because I had lived them. When they succeeded, we succeeded. This philosophy turned customers into evangelists who recommended us to everyone they knew. As our reputation grew, so did the awards and recognition. Small Business Technology Provider of the Year, Forbes 30 Under 30, Inc. 5,000 Fastest Growing Companies. Each accolade was gratifying, but what really mattered to me were the emails and calls from business owners telling me how our software had changed their lives, helped them hire more employees, or even saved their family businesses. Through it all, I maintained a relatively low personal profile. I wasn't interested in becoming a celebrity CEO or building a personal brand. I preferred focusing on the work itself and the impact we were making. My employees knew me as approachable and passionate, but to the outside world, I was just another entrepreneur building a company, which was exactly how I wanted it. Despite my growing success, I continued making monthly trips back to Michigan for family dinners. These visits became a strange exercise in denial, with my parents showing almost no interest in my business achievements. If I mentioned a new client milestone or industry award, my father would quickly change the subject to Michael's medical school progress or some colleague's academic publication. "That's nice, dear," my mother would say distractedly before asking, "Did you hear that Michael was selected for a prestigious research position?" At first, their dismissal stung sharply, but gradually I grew accustomed to the dynamic. I began to see these dinners as a bizarre ritual, where we all pretended I was still the family disappointment who had made a regrettable life choice. Meanwhile, my company continued expanding, and my personal wealth grew substantially. When my father developed heart problems, requiring expensive surgery during year 4 of my business, I anonymously paid off their mortgage through a complex arrangement with their bank. They never knew it was me. I wanted to help, without the complication of acknowledgement or gratitude, which would have disrupted our carefully maintained family fiction. Similarly, when Michael needed help with medical school tuition after a scholarship fell through, I stepped in telling him he could pay me back someday if he wanted. Unlike our parents, Michael at least expressed genuine gratitude and occasionally asked about my business with real interest. Still, he was deeply embedded in the academic value system our parents had created and couldn't fully understand my world. "I don't know how you do it, Jess," he said once over coffee during his break between hospital rotations, "running a whole company without any formal training. Aren't you worried about hitting a ceiling someday?" I just smiled, not bothering to explain that my practical education in business had been far more comprehensive than anything he could imagine. I had negotiated multi-million-dollar contracts, managed dozens of employees, and navigated complex regulatory environments across multiple countries. The ceiling he worried about was a concept from the academic world that had little relevance to mine. During year 6 of my business, I met Alexander at a charity gala in Chicago. He was an architect with his own successful firm, and unlike most men I dated, he seemed genuinely impressed by my accomplishments rather than intimidated. After 3 months of dating, I invited him to join me for one of the family dinners in Michigan. The evening was enlightening. I watched Alexander's expression shift from confusion to disbelief as he witnessed my parents effectively erasing my professional existence from the conversation. When I mentioned securing a contract with a major retail association that would increase our revenue by 30%, my father nodded absently before launching into a 20-minute monologue about his department's latest research. Grant. In the car afterward, Alexander was incredulous. "Did that really just happen? Do they have any idea what you've built?" "They know I have some kind of tech business," I said with a shrug that concealed years of hurt. "They just don't think it matters much without a degree behind it." "That's insane," he said, genuinely angry on my behalf. "You're one of the most successful entrepreneurs I've ever met. Any parent should be bursting with pride." His outrage made me see the situation through fresh eyes. I had normalized their behavior for so long that I had stopped questioning it. After that visit, I began seeing a therapist to work through my complicated feelings about my family. Dr. Rivera helped me understand that I was still seeking approval, that might never come, and that their inability to recognize my success was about their limitations, not mine. "You've built your business on seeing opportunities others miss," she told me during one session. "But with your family, you're stuck in a pattern where you keep investing in a relationship that gives poor returns." What would you advise a client who continued pouring resources into a partnership that consistently undervalued them? It was a powerful perspective that started me thinking about creating more boundaries. Still, completely cutting ties felt impossible. They were my family despite everything. Around this time, I purchased a beautiful beach house in Florida as a retreat from both Michigan winters and family tension. Set on a pristine stretch of coastline with floor-to-ceiling windows capturing breathtaking ocean views, It represented not just financial success, but emotional freedom. I initially told no one in my family about this purchase, keeping it as my private sanctuary. As my business approached its 7th anniversary, we secured a major partnership that made national business news. For the first time, my company's valuation and my role as founder became public knowledge in a way that would be difficult for anyone connected to me to ignore. I wondered if this might finally change my parents' perception, but when I arrived for Thanksgiving dinner that year, they had apparently managed to miss or dismiss this news entirely. Instead, the holiday conversation centered on Michael's impending graduation from medical school and which prestigious residency programs were recruiting him. I listened and smiled, bringing out the expensive wine I had brought and generous gifts for everyone. My mother accepted the designer handbag I gave her with surprise at its quality, still not connecting that my little computer business could afford such things. "This is too extravagant, Jessica," she said with a hint of disapproval. "You should be saving your money." I just smiled, not mentioning that the bag represented less than an hour of my company's revenue. "I wanted you to have something special, Mom." As I drove back to my hotel that night, I felt the familiar ache of being unseen by the people who should know me best. But for the first time, I also felt something else, a growing certainty that I needed to stop defining myself through their eyes. My father's retirement party marked 40 years of distinguished academic service. The university organized an elaborate reception in the grand hall of the economics building that bore the name of a long-dead donor. Tweed jackets and sensible dresses filled the room, along with the soft murmur of scholarly conversation. I arrived early, elegantly dressed, and bearing a gift I had spent weeks selecting, a rare first edition of an economic text my father had often cited as foundational to his research. As I moved through the crowd, I overheard fragments of admiring conversation about Walter Armstrong's brilliant career, his contributions to economic theory, his mentorship of countless PhD candidates. I felt a familiar mix of genuine pride in his accomplishments and the lingering hurt of knowing my own achievements would never receive similar recognition in his world. My mother spotted me and hurried over, fussing with my hair in a way that made me feel 16 again. "You look nice, dear. Thank you for coming. Your father will be pleased." I doubted that, but smiled anyway. I wouldn't miss it. The formal program began with a series of speeches from colleagues, former students, and university officials. Each speaker praised my father's intellectual rigor, his dedication to academic excellence, his uncompromising standards. When the university president announced the creation of the Walter Armstrong Fellowship for Economic Research, the room erupted in applause. My father looked genuinely moved as he rose to give his remarks. For nearly 30 minutes, he spoke eloquently about his career journey, thanking mentors, colleagues, and students who had challenged and inspired him. He acknowledged my mother's unwavering support, praised Michael's promising medical career, and even thanked distant relatives who had traveled to attend. My name never passed his lips. I sat perfectly still, maintaining a pleasant expression through sheer force of will, as my father thanked the department administrative assistant, but not his elder daughter. At the reception afterward, I approached him with my gift wrapped in elegant paper. "Congratulations, Dad. 40 years is quite an achievement." He seemed surprised to see me, as if he had forgotten I was there. "Jessica. Yes, thank you for coming." When he unwrapped the book, he showed the first genuine spark of pleasure I had seen directed at me in years. "This is a first edition. How did you find this?" "I have resources," I said simply. "I know how much his work has meant to you." For a moment, I thought we might share a real connection, but then a colleague approached, and my father shifted immediately into academic mode, explaining the book's significance while I stood forgotten beside him. Later, as the crowd thinned, I found myself alone with my father near the bar. Buoyed by the success of my gift and perhaps by the champagne, I decided to try once more for a meaningful exchange. "Dad, I just closed a deal that will take Armstrong Solutions international in a much bigger way. We're expanding into 15 new countries next quarter." He sighed, setting down his glass with a sharp click. "Jessica, must you talk about money at an academic function? This evening is about intellectual contributions, not commercial ventures." Something in me snapped. Years of dismissed achievements and conditional love crystallized into a moment of perfect clarity. My work has intellectual value, Dad. We've developed proprietary algorithms that have revolutionized inventory management for thousands of small businesses. Our work has saved countless family businesses from bankruptcy. He looked at me with something between pity and contempt. Playing with computers and charging people for it hardly compares to advancing human knowledge. Without proper academic credentials, you're just dabbling. Dabbling, I repeated, keeping my voice steady despite the anger building inside me. My dabbling employs over 200 people with excellent salaries and benefits. My dabbling has created more practical value in 7 years than most academic papers do in a lifetime. His face darkened. That's exactly the kind of anti-intellectual attitude I would expect from someone who couldn't complete a basic degree. Success isn't measured in dollars, Jessica. It's measured in contribution to society, to knowledge. And you think I haven't contributed? Our software has helped more real people maintain their livelihoods than... Enough, he interrupted, voice rising enough that nearby guests turned to look. This is precisely why you never fit in academia. You can't separate emotion from reason. You think making money equals significance. That's not what I said at all, I replied, struggling to maintain my composure. I've spent my life advancing economic theory, and you have the audacity to lecture me about business. His voice dropped to a harsh whisper. You're nothing but an uneducated lowlife who got lucky selling computer programs. Just leave. You're embarrassing yourself and me. The words hit like physical blows. Across the room, I saw my mother watching but making no move to intervene. Michael stood awkwardly nearby, eyes fixed on his shoes. For a moment, the room seemed to tilt around me, but then a strange calm descended. I see, I said quietly. Thank you for clarifying how you feel. I set my champagne glass down, carefully turned, and walked steadily toward the exit, back straight, head high. No scene, no tears, no raised voice. I simply removed myself from a situation where I was neither valued nor wanted. In the quiet of my car, I finally allowed the tears to come, not loud sobs, but silent streams that felt like releasing a poison that had been inside me for years. Driving back to my hotel, I realized I had been chasing my parents' approval like it was the one acquisition that would complete my portfolio of success. But it was an investment that would never pay returns, and it was time to reallocate my emotional resources. By the time I reached my room, I felt lighter than I had in years, despite the pain. The decision that had been forming unconsciously for months suddenly crystallized with perfect clarity. It was time to stop trying to exist in two incompatible worlds. The next morning, I woke with unexpected clarity. The hurt remained, but it was overshadowed by a sense of purpose. I had built a $45 million company by making decisive strategic moves. Now I would apply the same approach to my personal life. First, I called Rachel, my executive assistant, who had been with me since our company had just 10 employees. I need to move to the Florida property immediately, I told her. Please arrange for the essential business equipment to be shipped there today. Priority items first, remainder to follow. Rachel, accustomed to executing complex logistics without unnecessary questions, simply said, Of course. Do you need the jet today or tomorrow? Tomorrow morning will be fine. As the company had expanded internationally, we had invested in a small private jet that had quickly paid for itself in saved time and increased deal closures. Also, please inform the executive team we'll have a full video conference at 4 p.m. tomorrow. We'll need to adjust some operational protocols for my remote work. Next, I called my brother Michael. Despite his passive stance at the retirement party, he was the only family member I wasn't ready to completely distance myself from. He answered on the first ring. Jess, I'm so sorry about last night. Dad was way out of line. It's fine, I said, surprised at how calm I felt. But I wanted you to know I'm moving to my place in Florida permanently. I won't be attending family gatherings for the foreseeable future. You have a place in Florida? He asked, sounding confused. A beach house. I bought it last year. I had never mentioned it because such purchases seemed to only reinforce my family's perception of me as materialistic. Oh, a pause. Jess, I know Dad was horrible, but you don't have to move across the country. I'm not moving because of what Dad said, I explained, though that wasn't entirely true. I'm moving because I've spent years trying to be part of a family that can't accept me as I am. It's not a healthy dynamic for anyone. Michael was silent for a moment. He's wrong about you, you know. What you've built is incredible. I should have said something last night. Thank you for saying it now, I replied. We'll stay in touch, Michael. This isn't about you. After hanging up, I began packing with methodical efficiency. My most important belongings filled just 3 suitcases. The rest could be shipped or replaced. As I moved through my house, I realized how little emotional attachment I felt to most of my possessions. They were just things, not anchors. Before leaving, I stood in the doorway for one last look. This house, which had once represented such achievement, now felt like a monument to seeking validation I didn't need. I locked the door without regret. The next morning, I boarded the company jet at a small private airport. As Michigan disappeared beneath the clouds, I felt the weight of expectations lifting. 3 hours later, we descended toward the Florida coast, the turquoise waters and white sand beaches coming into view. My driver met me at the airport and took me directly to the beach house. Standing on the expansive deck overlooking the Gulf of Mexico, I took my first deep breath in what felt like years. The house was everything. My life in Michigan wasn't open, bright, uncluttered by others' expectations. Floor-to-ceiling windows erased the boundary between inside and outside. The sound of waves replaced the constant mental echo of my father's criticism. I had purchased this property as an occasional retreat, but it was perfectly equipped to become my primary residence and remote office. The 3rd floor contained a state-of-the-art home office with multiple monitors, secure servers, and a video conferencing system that made virtual meetings nearly as effective as being there in person. By 4 o'clock, everything was set up for the executive team meeting. On my screen, the familiar faces of my leadership team appeared. Alex from product development, Stephanie from marketing, Jason from operations, Diane from finance, and several others who had helped build Armstrong Solutions into what it was today. As you can see, I'm calling from a new location, I began. I've decided to make Florida my primary residence and will be running operations from here going forward. If they were surprised, they didn't show it. This team had weathered product launches, market expansions, and competitive challenges together. A CEO changing locations was hardly the most dramatic shift they'd experienced. We've been moving toward a more distributed leadership model already, I continued. This accelerates that transition. I'll be in Michigan quarterly for in-person strategy sessions, but otherwise we'll maintain our current virtual collaboration protocols. The team nodded, asked practical questions about time zones and travel schedules, and then moved on to regular business matters. No drama, no lengthy explanations required. This was the world I had built, where results mattered more than appearances and adaptation was valued over tradition. After the meeting, I walked barefoot along the beach as the sun began to set. The warm sand between my toes and the rhythmic sound of waves created a meditative backdrop for my thoughts. For the first time in my adult life, I wasn't straddling 2 worlds or measuring myself against impossible standards. I was simply me, Jessica Armstrong, entrepreneur, creator of value, a woman who had built something meaningful on her own terms. In the following days, I established a new routine. Mornings began with coffee on the deck, watching dolphins play in the distance. Work filled the middle of the day, still intense, but somehow less stressful without the background radiation of family tension. Evenings brought walks on the beach or conversations with neighbors who knew nothing of my background or business success. One of these neighbors, Eleanor, was a retired judge who had moved to Florida after 30 years on the federal bench. During one sunset walk, she asked what had brought me to the beach community. A fresh start, I said simply. She nodded as if this explained everything. The ocean is good for that. It reminds us how small our problems are in the grand scheme. As I looked out at the endless horizon where sky met water, I felt the truth of her words. The empire I had built, my father's cruel dismissal, the family dynamics I had left behind, all seemed to shrink to proper proportion. Important, yes, but not all-encompassing. Not worth sacrificing my peace of mind. 3 weeks passed in a productive rhythm of work and rejuvenation. Freed from the emotional drain of seeking parental approval, I found myself more creative and decisive in business matters. Armstrong Solutions secured 2 major partnerships that had been in negotiation for months, and our international expansion proceeded ahead of schedule. Then came the Forbes article. A business journalist had been researching a feature on unconventional success stories and somehow connected the dots between the retirement party incident, apparently academic gossip traveled, and my company's recent expansion. Announcements. She reached out for an interview, which I initially declined, but her angle intrigued me: the hidden costs of family expectations in entrepreneurship. After careful consideration and consultation with our PR team, I agreed to a limited interview focusing primarily on business strategy with personal elements kept to a minimum. When the article appeared, however, it painted a more complete picture than I had anticipated. Jessica Armstrong, the $45 million CEO no one saw coming, built her tech empire while her academic parents dismissed her as a college dropout. Now, running her company from a stunning Florida beach house, Armstrong has revolutionized small business software while maintaining a remarkably low profile. Success isn't always recognized by those closest to you, Armstrong told Forbes in a rare interview. Sometimes you have to define it for yourself. The article went on to detail Armstrong Solutions' growth trajectory, innovative business model, and plans for international expansion. It included quotes from industry analysts praising our customer retention rates and proprietary technology. And there beside the text was a professional photograph of me standing on my deck with the ocean behind me, looking confident and successful. My phone began ringing almost immediately after publication. The first call surprisingly came from Michael. "Jess, have you seen it, the Forbes piece?" "Yes, just this morning," I replied. "It's all over Dad's department. One of his colleagues brought it to his attention." Michael sounded both anxious and amused. He's having some difficulty processing it." "I can imagine," I said, feeling neither vindication nor regret. "How are you, Michael?" "I'm good. Actually, I was hoping I might visit you in Florida next weekend. I have a few days off between rotations." This surprised me. Michael and I had maintained our relationship through occasional calls and texts, but we hadn't spent real time together in years. "I'd like that," I said sincerely. After Michael's call came several others from my parents that I let go to voicemail. My father's messages grew increasingly agitated, demanding I call him back immediately to explain this publicity stunt. My mother's tone was different, confused, and tentative. "Jessica, we just saw this article about your company. I had no idea it was so significant. Please call when you can." I replied with a brief text. "The article is accurate. I'm doing well. I hope you and Dad are too." 5 days later, Michael arrived at my beach house, staring in undisguised awe at the property as my driver delivered him from the airport. "This is yours?" he asked, taking in the expansive glass facade, private beach access, and manicured grounds. The article said, "Beach house. This is an estate." I shrugged. It's home now. Over dinner on the deck, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks, Michael finally addressed the elephant in the room. "They're struggling with this, Jess. Especially Dad. The Forbes article has been circulating among his colleagues. People are asking questions." "What kind of questions?" I asked, sipping my wine. "Like how the daughter of Walter Armstrong built a tech company valued at $45 million without anyone knowing, like why he never mentions you at department functions, like whether your business methods derive from his economic theories." Michael looked uncomfortable. He doesn't know how to answer them. "That sounds difficult for him," I said neutrally. Michael studied me across the table. "You've changed. You're different here." "How so?" "More settled, confident, less like you're trying to prove something." I smiled. "That's because I'm not trying to prove anything anymore. Not to Dad, not to anyone." After a moment, he asked, "Are you happier?" "Yes," I answered without hesitation. "I am." During the next 2 days, I showed Michael around the area, introduced him to neighbors, and even gave him a tour of my remote office setup. He seemed genuinely impressed by both my business operation and my new life. On his last evening, as we walked along the beach, he brought up our parents again. They want to see you, Jess, to talk. I stopped walking and faced the ocean. I'm not sure that's a good idea yet. Dad's pride is hurt, but I think he's also, I don't know, maybe realizing something Mom definitely is. That article made them see you differently. It shouldn't have taken a national publication for them to see me at all, I pointed out. You're right, Michael acknowledged. But people can change, can't they? Isn't that worth something? I considered his words carefully. Tell them I'll meet them for dinner when I'm next in Miami for business. Neutral territory. 2 weeks later, that meeting took place at an upscale restaurant overlooking Biscayne Bay. I arrived first, selecting a quiet corner table. When my parents entered, they looked smaller, somehow less imposing than the figures who had loomed so large in my emotional landscape. My mother reached for me, immediately pulling me into an awkward hug. Jessica, you look wonderful. My father stood stiffly, extended his hand, then thought better of it, and nodded instead. Jessica. Throughout the appetizers, conversation remained painfully stilted. We discussed the weather, Michael's residency applications, my mother's garden. Finally, as the main courses arrived, my mother broke the impasse. Your company sounds very impressive, Jessica. The article mentioned you have offices in several countries now. 8 countries, I confirmed, soon to be 23. And you run all of this? My father asked, his tone a mixture of disbelief and something that might have been grudging respect. I founded it and serve as CEO, I replied evenly. I have an excellent executive team. All without finishing your degree, he said, but the usual judgment was missing from his voice. Yes, though education comes in many forms. An uncomfortable silence followed, broken finally by my mother. We'd like to see your beach house sometime, if that would be all right. I studied them both, searching for signs of the dismissive parents who had wounded me so deeply. What I saw instead were 2 aging academics confronting a reality that didn't fit their worldview, trying awkwardly to adapt. You'd be welcome to visit, I said carefully, but I need to be clear about something first. I've built a life I'm proud of on my own terms. I'm open to rebuilding our relationship, but only if you can accept me and my choices as they are. My father looked down at his plate, then back at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. We may have been incorrect in some of our assessments. Coming from Walter Armstrong, this halting near apology was unprecedented. My mother reached across the table for my hand. We miss you, Jessica. The visit happened a month later. I arranged for the company jet to bring them directly to the local airport where my driver met them. Watching from the deck as the car pulled up, I felt a strange mix of anxiety and confidence. This was my territory now. My mother emerged, first exclaiming over the ocean view, even before reaching the front door. My father followed more slowly, taking in the scale of the property with widening eyes. Welcome, I said, simply opening the door to a home I had never expected them to enter. The tour was revealing. My mother admired the design and decor with genuine appreciation. My father said little until we reached my office, where the wall of awards and press mentions finally seemed to penetrate his academic skepticism. This is substantial, he said, examining a crystal trophy for technology, innovation of the year. You've built something significant. Yes, I agreed. I have. That evening, sitting on the deck with the sound of waves in the background, my mother finally addressed what had happened. We were wrong, Jessica. I was wrong. I didn't understand what you were building because it was outside my experience. Tears filled her eyes. I'm so sorry we couldn't see you. My father struggled visibly before adding, academic achievement was the only path I knew to measure success. I lacked perspective. It wasn't a complete reconciliation. Decades of misunderstanding couldn't be erased in one weekend. But it was a beginning based on a new reality where I was no longer seeking their approval, but offering them the opportunity to know the woman I had become. As they left the following day, my father paused at the door. The work you're doing, it has merit, considerable merit. From Walter Armstrong, this was the equivalent of a standing ovation. 6 months after my parents' visit to Florida, our family dynamics had shifted into a new pattern. We weren't suddenly a perfect family with complete understanding, but we had established a more authentic relationship based on who we actually were, rather than who my parents had expected me to be. My business continued to thrive, expanding into new markets and growing beyond even my ambitious projections. By the end of the year, Armstrong Solutions was valued at $60 million, with over 300 employees worldwide. We maintained our focus on serving small businesses while adding new product lines for mid-sized companies facing similar challenges. My parents made efforts that would have seemed impossible a year earlier. My father actually read our technical white papers and asked semi-intelligent questions about our market strategy. My mother proudly mentioned my daughter, the CEO, to her friends. These changes were sometimes awkward, occasionally forced, but they represented genuine attempts to see me clearly. When Michael graduated from medical school that spring, I flew to Michigan for the ceremony. Sitting beside my parents in the audience, I felt a complex mix of emotions: pride in my brother's achievement, echoes of old pain from my own academic departure, and a new sense of peace about the different paths we had taken. At the family celebration afterward, my father raised his glass to Michael, following in the proud Armstrong tradition of excellence. Then, after a slight pause, he added, "And to Jessica, who showed us that excellence takes many forms." It was a small moment, but a significant one. Not a dramatic Hollywood reconciliation, but a quiet acknowledgement that represented real growth. Back in Florida, I found myself building a different kind of family, a community of friends and neighbors who accepted me without the weight of history or expectation. Eleanor, my retired judge neighbor, became a valued mentor. We walked the beach most evenings, sharing insights from our very different career paths. "Family relationships are like the tide," she told me once. "They retreat and advance. The important thing is to build your life on solid ground, not on shifting sand." I also met Christopher during this period, a marine biologist who ran conservation programs along the coast. Unlike Alexander, whose initial support had eventually given way to intimidation by my success, Christopher had built his own meaningful career, and was neither threatened by nor overly impressed by mine. Our relationship developed slowly, based on mutual respect and genuine connection rather than superficial attraction. "I like that you're completely yourself with me," he said one evening as we watched the sunset. "No performance, no apologies." I had to learn how to do that, I admitted. It didn't come naturally. As my personal life found balance, I began thinking about how to use my experience to help others. I established a mentorship program specifically for entrepreneurs without traditional educational backgrounds, particularly those facing family pressure to conform to conventional paths. We provided not just business guidance, but emotional support for navigating the complex terrain of building success on your own terms. This foundation grew into something I never expected: a full scholarship program and alternative business education platform for promising entrepreneurs from backgrounds similar to mine. We partnered with successful business leaders who had taken unconventional paths, creating a curriculum based on practical experience rather than theory. The first cohort of 50 students included people who had been told, as I had, that their ideas weren't worth pursuing without the right credentials. Watching them develop their business concepts under our guidance became one of the most rewarding aspects of my career. During a mentoring session with a young woman who had dropped out of college to pursue her tech startup, she asked me what I considered the most important lesson from my journey. "Learning that other people's definitions of success and failure don't have to be yours," I told her, "even when those people are the ones who raised you." My healing journey continued in ways both large and small. The reflexive need for parental approval gradually faded, replaced by a stronger internal compass. I came to see my parents not as the all-powerful arbiters of worth they had seemed in my younger years, but as imperfect people with limited perspectives who had done their best according to their own lights. One evening, walking along the beach as the sun dipped below the horizon, I realized I had finally achieved something more valuable than business success or family reconciliation: peace with myself. The consistent sound of waves washing against the shore reminded me that life continues its rhythm regardless of our individual struggles. What matters is finding our own place in that rhythm. My story isn't about revenge or proving people wrong, though there were moments when those emotions fueled me. It's about finding the courage to define success on your own terms, even when the people who should support you most cannot see your vision. It's about building something authentic rather than following someone else's blueprint for your life. The family we're born into shapes us in countless ways, but the family we choose, the community we build around us often better, reflects who we truly are. My beach house began as a retreat from rejection, but transformed into the center of a life more aligned with my values and strengths than anything I could have built while trying to fit into someone else's expectations. So what about you? Have you ever had to choose between pleasing others and following your own path? What dreams are you setting aside to meet someone else's definition of success? Remember that sometimes the greatest act of courage is simply being authentically yourself in a world that's trying to make you something else. I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. If this resonated with you, please like this video and subscribe to my channel for more stories about finding your own way. Thank you for listening, and remember, the path that's right for you might not make sense to anyone else, and that's perfectly okay. Point 2, 2, 2, 2.